I never believed in those near-death experience stories. I always thought they were just inventions, delusions of people seeking attention. But what happened to me was real and changed my life forever. My name is Stephen. I was born and raised in Guatemala, and until I was 34, I was absolutely sure about who I was. I was always practical, independent, and tough. From a young age, I learned that relying on others was a mistake. I grew up watching my mother suffer because of my father's abandonment. She always said that men were worthless, and those words were etched into me as absolute truth. At 16, I realized I wasn't attracted to boys. I was more interested in girls. I had my first girlfriends, and over time, I came to accept that this was my identity. I never wanted a man to be part of my life. Nothing against it. I just didn't see the need. If something broke at home, I fixed it. If I had to carry something heavy, I carried it. If a light bulb burned out, I changed it myself. And that was exactly what led me to death. That night, I was home alone, as usual. The porch light went out, and I didn't think twice before grabbing the ladder and climbing up to change it. It wasn't hard. I had done it so many times before. But that day, something happened. As I reached out to screw in the new light bulb, I felt a slight imbalance. My foot slipped, and then everything went blurry. The last thing I remember was the impact of sharp pain, a ringing in my ears, and then silence. My neighbor Charles heard the noise from the fall and rushed to my house. He found me unconscious, unresponsive, and took me to the hospital in a hurry. They later said I arrived there still alive, but shortly after admission, my heart stopped for exactly 8 minutes. I was declared clinically dead. What happened during those 8 minutes was something my mind could never have imagined, something that challenged everything I believed. I left my body, I saw the hospital. I saw the doctors trying to revive me, but I wasn't there. And then something happened. Something that would change my life forever. I didn't know I was dead. At first it all felt like a strange dream. Just moments before, I felt the pain from the fall, the impact against the ground, the distant sound of my neighbor calling my name. And then, silence. Absolute silence. Suddenly there I was in the exact spot where I had fallen, but something felt different, an indescribable lightness. There was no pain, no weight, no fear. I stood up instinctively, effortlessly, but when I looked down, my body was still there. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. I was lying on the veranda floor, motionless, pale, with my eyes half open, lifeless. My first reaction was to scream for help, but no sound came out. In fact, I wasn't even breathing. Panic set in. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. I tried to touch my own arm, but my fingers passed right through it, as if I were made of mist. Despair overwhelmed me. What was happening to me? I heard hurried footsteps, and seconds later, my neighbor Charles appeared. I saw his expression change. In that instant, he knelt beside me, shook my shoulder, and called my name. "Stephen, can you hear me?" I was right there, but he couldn't see me. I started running through the house, trying to process everything. And that's when I noticed something even more terrifying. I wasn't stepping on the ground, I was gliding through the space. There was no friction, no weight, no limits. It was as if gravity didn't exist for me. And then, without warning, I was pulled upward. The house disappeared. Everything around me turned dark, but it wasn't ordinary darkness. It wasn't like closing my eyes. It was an absolute void. No sound, no color, no shape. I felt something I had never felt before, a loneliness that went beyond any human sadness. And then, voices. They started as whispers, then evolved into distant echoes until they became clear words. But what terrified me the most was that they were talking about me. She never believed, always rejected the truth, thought she knew everything. The fear crept up my spine. Who was saying that? Where was I? My instinct told me to run, but I had nowhere to go. I floated in a directionless space. And then I saw a scene forming below, as if I were looking through an invisible glass. It was the hospital. I saw my own body being rushed through the corridors, surrounded by doctors and nurses. A doctor pressed on my forehead and tried to revive me. I saw electrodes being attached to my chest, the frantic movement of the team. I remember when one of the doctors looked at the clock and said something that sent a chill down my spine. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. I was dead. Those words hit me like an overwhelming weight. It was the end of everything. Then, as if something was pulling me away from that scene, I was thrown back into the void. The feeling was worse than anything I had ever experienced. It was like falling without ever hitting the ground, like screaming with no one to hear. And then there was a light. At first it was just a distant point, but as it came closer, I felt something change inside me. The fear began to fade, as if that light had the power to lift all the darkness surrounding me. My heart, or whatever was left of it, tightened. Something told me this was not just a light, it was someone. And when I could finally see, my world changed forever. The light grew. It wasn't like looking at the sun or a bulb that's too bright. It was something alive. I could feel the light like a warmth that didn't burn, like a hug that embraced every part of my being. And then he appeared. At first just a silhouette, but as he came closer, I knew without a doubt it was Jesus. My chest, or whatever part was there, tightened. A wave of emotions washed over me. Fear, shame, peace, all at once. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. He looked at me, and in that moment I knew he knew everything about me. Not just my life, my choices, my mistakes. He knew my deepest fears, my hidden pains. He knew about the nights I cried alone, the anger I carried in my heart. He knew how much I rejected the idea that he was real, and yet he loved me. Jesus reached out his hand to me, and the moment he did, everything around me changed. The dark void disappeared. Suddenly, I was in a place that human words could never describe. It was beautiful, but not in a usual way. It wasn't like a pretty landscape or a city full of lights. It was a holy kind of beauty, something that made me want to kneel and cry, because for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The peace radiating from that place was something I had never felt before. I saw colors that don't exist on earth, and heard sounds that weren't exactly music, but touched my soul directly. The very air seemed filled with love, grace, something pure and incorruptible. Jesus began to walk, and I followed him. Around us, celestial beings appeared. I couldn't tell if they were angels, but their presence inspired an indescribable reverence. Some sang, while others simply worshipped in a way my human mind couldn't comprehend. Yet even though all of this was wonderful, something inside me felt heavy. I didn't belong there. No matter how amazing that place was, I sensed something was holding me back from truly being part of it, as if my soul carried a weight that couldn't enter that world. Jesus stopped and looked at me again, and in that moment I understood. There was something I needed to hear, something that would change everything. And Jesus, with a voice that seemed to carry the very sound of eternity, was about to reveal it to me. Jesus continued to stand right in front of me, looking directly into my eyes. But that gaze wasn't one of judgment. It wasn't disapproval. It was love, a love so deep I could hardly bear it. My legs, it felt like they gave way. At that moment they failed me, and I fell to my knees. A whirlwind of emotions overwhelmed me, shame, fear, and the certainty that I didn't deserve to be there. But Jesus didn't step back. He simply smiled. Then, without moving his lips, images began to appear around me. It was as if I were watching my own life from a perspective I'd never seen before. I saw my childhood. I saw my mother, so hurt by abandonment, repeating the phrase that had shaped my worldview. Men are no good. I saw little Stephanie growing up with that belief engraved in her heart. I saw the teenager who distanced herself from anything masculine, who built walls to protect herself, choosing never to depend on anyone. And then, I saw something I'd never noticed before, amid all that pain and rejection. There were good men around us. I saw the neighbor who, though not close to us, always helped my mother fix things around the house. I saw her boss, who let her leave early when I was sick. I saw the teacher who encouraged me to study and said I was too smart to give up on school. I saw the waiter at the restaurant who always served us with a smile, treating us with respect every time. And then my heart tightened. Why had I never noticed this before? I had always believed men were no good, but here was the truth. God always places good people in our path. I just didn't want to see it. I felt a lump in my throat, but the biggest revelation was still to come. Jesus reached out his hand and the scene changed again. This time I saw my father. He looked older than I remembered, sitting alone in a chair, staring into nothing. Then I saw it. He was crying out of regret. My mind screamed, "No, he left us. He doesn't deserve my forgiveness." But my heart already knew the truth. I had spent my entire life carrying hate, pain, and rejection, but none of that healed my mother. None of it changed my past. None of it made me happy. The hatred I felt toward him didn't affect him. It affected me. That was when Jesus spoke. His voice was unlike any ordinary sound. It resonated deep within me, breaking down all the walls I had built over the years. "Forgive, Stephen." I trembled. My first instinct was to refuse, to say I couldn't. But before I could reply, he continued, "You have been carrying a burden you don't need to bear. I have known you since the womb of your mother. I know your pain, your struggles, your fears, but it's time to let that go. Do you want to be free? Then forgive." My tears began to fall. Forgive after everything. But then Jesus came even closer and everything changed. The pain I felt, the bitterness, the anger, it all melted away in his presence. Jesus showed me what I never wanted to admit. I didn't choose to distance myself from men out of love for women. I chose this because I wanted to repel men. It was a form of protection, of control. If I never let a man get close, I would never risk being hurt like my mother was hurt. It was a shock. For so many years I believed my identity was defined, but now, in the face of truth, everything made sense. It wasn't about desire, it was about fear. Jesus looked at me again and said something that burned in my soul. "I made you with a purpose. Everything I created has an order, a balance, a plan. Man and woman were created to complete each other, to support each other, to form families. This is part of my design." My mind was racing. But God is so wonderful that he gave us free will. Jesus knelt before me and took my hands. For the first time, I truly felt his touch. It was peace, it was love, it was life. "Now, Stephanie, you can choose." My heart pounded. "You can continue on the path you've always taken, or you can trust in me." That was it. The choice was mine. The light around him seemed to pulse, as if the very heavens were waiting for my answer. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, there was only one thing I wanted to say. I choose to live in Christ. In that instant, I felt something being torn away from me, as if invisible chains had broken, as if a burden I had carried my whole life had vanished. And for the first time in my life, I felt true peace. But it wasn't over yet. Jesus smiled and said, "Then go back. There is still something you need to do." Before I could ask what he meant, darkness surrounded me again. The sky disappeared, and when I opened my eyes, I was back in the hospital. The first thing I felt was pain. It was like I had been abruptly pulled from a place free of suffering and thrown back into a heavy, weak, broken body. My chest burned, my head throbbed, and the beeping of machines filled the room. My eyes were still adjusting to the light and everything seemed blurry. It was only when I tried to take a deep breath that I realized I was alive. The hospital. It took me a few moments to understand where I was. I felt the weight of the blanket over me, the smell of disinfectant in the air, the electrodes stuck to my chest. Voices were around me, faint at first, until one became clear. "She's back! My God, she's back!" A nurse hurried out of the room, calling for the doctors. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hall. I wanted to speak, but my throat felt dry, as if I hadn't spoken in days. And then the weight of reality crashed down on me. I had died. And more than that, I had seen Jesus. The memory hit me with overwhelming force, the brightness of the light, his voice, the truth he shared with me. Everything was so alive inside me, so vivid, so real. But how could I explain this to anyone? The doctor rushed in, examined me, and checked my vital signs. He looked at me as if he were witnessing a miracle. "Stephanie, you really scared us. You were dead for 8 minutes." 8 minutes. It felt like an eternity, but I knew that something inside me had changed forever. The following days were a whirlwind. My mother was called to the hospital, and when she saw me awake, she broke down in tears at my side. I tried to explain what happened, but the words got stuck. How could I tell her that Jesus showed me everything I never wanted to see? That the hatred I had carried for so many years against my father was destroying me? That my perception of my own identity was rooted in fear, not love? I tried, but no one seemed to understand. "Honey, you hit your head. This could be a result of the trauma. You were unconscious. Your brain must have created those images. It was just a dream." But I knew it wasn't a dream. It was real. And the more I tried to stay silent, the more it burned inside me. I needed to tell the world what Jesus showed me. But would anyone believe me? The truth is, I was still trying to understand it all, who I was now. It was when I was discharged that I realized my life would never be the same. I had to decide, would I hide this truth forever, or would I have the courage to speak up? I was not the same after that experience. Nothing inside me seemed to fit together the way it once did. I looked in the mirror and saw a familiar face, but I knew that inside everything had changed. But changing wasn't easy. In the first few days, I tried to return to my routine, wake up, go to work, chat with the same friends, pretend nothing had happened. But no matter how hard I tried, there was something inside me screaming. I could no longer look at life with the same eyes. The conversations that used to entertain me now felt empty. The opinions I once defended so firmly now seemed distant, as if they belonged to someone I was no longer. And the worst part, the fear of sharing what I experienced. How could I tell people that I died, went to heaven, saw Jesus, and came back transformed? How could I explain that he revealed truths I had denied my whole life? How could I say that he gave me a choice, and I chose to live for him? For a while, I kept everything inside, but the more I stayed silent, the more I felt like I was suffocating. It was like trying to hold fire inside my chest. One night, while trying to fall asleep, the words of Jesus came back to me. "Do you want to be free? Then forgive." That's when I realized my transformation wouldn't start until I obeyed what he asked of me. I needed to forgive my father, and that terrified me. I had spent years convincing myself he didn't deserve my forgiveness. But what if forgiveness isn't about deserving? What if forgiveness is about freedom? The next day, I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, my heart racing. But when I heard my father's voice on the other end, something inside me broke. He was silent when I told him I forgave him. Then came a muffled sob. "Forgive me, daughter. Forgive me." In that moment I knew God's love had not only freed me, it was freeing him too. That was the first step on my new journey. Since then, my life has been a journey of learning and surrender. I began studying the Bible, eager to understand more about the God who gave me a second chance. The truth had been there all along, but I had never wanted to see it, and now I could no longer deny it. I started letting go of everything that had once defined me because I realized my true identity has always been in Christ. Today, I know that God has a purpose for each of us. He created us with love, gave us a plan, a mission, and the freedom to choose. And I chose Jesus. Before I end, I want to leave you with the passage that marked my transformation. "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and if you're not yet part of this community, subscribe now for more stories that can change your life. God bless you.